Hi, welcome to Smokin and Swami. I'm Swami Chaitanya.
I'm Nikki, and welcome. We're going to talk about India today.
What about this guy?
Oh, and this is
That's
Tipu.
Tipu, the wonder dog.
Tipu's never been to India.
So we kind of ended up in Nepal last time. And so what happened in Nepal is that it got late in this year, November, and so on. Everybody say, well, let's go to Goa for Christmas, right? So then we trek on down to New Delhi and catch the train to Goa, right?
Right.
I better like this thing.
You better.
Okay.
So basically, living in India, we lived like the birds, like a bird. So, you'd spend the winter time in the south and the summertime in the north.
Right.
And you're going back and forth between the two constantly, packing up one house to go to the other. And we did this for many years, along with a lot of other people in India that did that.
But later on, we didn't go to Nepal. We would go to the Himalayas in North India.
Right.
Right, north of Varanasi and stuff like that. At one time, we went down to Delhi. We had how many boxes? We had these tin boxes, like 10, because we went from one house to the other. So anyway, we'd go down to Delhi, and then there was this, what, was a 48-hour?
Well, actually, it's interesting. You might know this already, but they called us the Hippie Raj. Because basically the British, when they were there, they would do a similar thing. They would go up to the mountains. To
Shimla in those days.
Right, what did they call it? The summer places or something. Yeah, the retreat. And where it would be cool.
The whole government would move up to the cool mountains and so on.
And they would have huge animal,
but
elephant
the government
parades.
in those times was in Calcutta before New Delhi. New Delhi wasn't really even built yet as the New Delhi, right?
So we had it easy. We just simply got on a bus and train.
But the train from New Delhi to Goa was like, what, 48 hours, wasn't it? Something like that? So 2 days of your life, you're on this train. And I got to know people, and we would always try and travel second-class AC sleeper, right?
I think they have a faster one now.
Oh, they have now the Rajdhani or something like that. But in those days, it would take 48 hours. And that's if the train wasn't delayed.
Yeah, it's
right.
Delayed.
And you still had to change trains up in Miraj or something like that to get down to Goa. And but you'd get to Goa, and all of a sudden now you come from the Himalayas, you come from up north, and now you're in this tropical thing: palm trees, the beach, and so on. And see, Portuguese had the control of Goa for many, many years, starting in like 1600 or something like that. And it was a very Portuguese colony, so it's very Catholic, and there's all these white churches
until long after the British had gone. They had it till the 1960s.
Exactly. Sometime in 1960, they got there they became part of India, but they still had this long tradition of, because the Portuguese, they went from Macau to Malacca in Malaysia, and then they'd come to Goa for the spice trade.
I mean, it always struck me as curious that it being the Catholic part of India, because the Portuguese were Catholic, it was actually looser. I mean, you'd think the Hindus would kind of be looser.
The difference was alcohol.
It was alcohol.
Right? As soon as you cross the border from any other state around it into Goa, there would be 10 liquor stores right at the border. Why? Because alcohol is a sacrament for the Catholics and the Christians in general.
Right.
So that was one of the big things, and people from all over India would come to Goa for Christmas just to get the alcohol and so on.
Well, and plus, traditionally, even when it was Portuguese, Goa was definitely a smuggling community.
Oh, absolutely.
They were smuggling spices. They were smuggling gold, probably. All kinds of precious stones, probably. And they would have gone right across the Arabian Sea to Arabia, basically, right?
Well, they would have gone, actually the Portuguese probably went all around Africa in their boats to begin with, because they're the first ones that did that. But later on, of course, they would go up the Red Sea and through the old caravan routes to Saudi Arabia.
So it has a tradition of nefarious activities, shall we say. So we felt right at home there.
Well, we were never smugglers, Nikki.
We were not smugglers.
No. We, of course, knew lots of people.
No,
in fact, there were people who said, I wouldn't trust anybody unless I knew they were a scammer.
Yeah.
Right? So
no, smuggling did not work. I mean, I tried sending that one letter from Afghanistan, and it didn't work.
Right. So anyway, we arrive in Goa, and you would come, and all of a sudden, it's like this tropical semi-paradise, and you go over to the beach. And in the very early days, people would just make little kind of lean-tos out of coconut palms and so on, and live kind of right on the beach. And then after a while, people started to, rent rooms in the houses of the local people.
Right.
And sometimes the local people would move into a little tiny room in the back and rent the whole house to the Westerners, right?
So Swami was there in Goa in the very early days, in the late 60s. I did not get to go until...
No, I wasn't there till, it was, I believe, 71.
71, okay. I didn't get to go until '86, I think, was the first time.
When we went together.
Because I'd been in India, but I avoided Goa like the plague. It was like, why do I want to be with a bunch of Westerners in India? I did go to Kerala. I was at Kovalam Beach when no one was there.
Right.
No other foreigners were there. It's now packed. Because that's what I was looking for. But then, after spending a few years in India, in a few years you're only talking like this and da-da-da, and sometimes you're really wanting to be talking to some other
like
people,
this,
you know, coming.
But
so you go to Goa, and all of a sudden you have these foreigners there that understand where you're coming from, because they've also been living in India. So it's good.
So anyway, I get to go in, what was it? It would have been 71 in like November, and I was in Mavay at the time. And we didn't go to Anjuna. We went south to Colva Beach. And that's actually where Eight Finger Eddie originally was, but he kind of already left for that. But there were just a few hippies around. We rented this whole house, a bunch of us together, and hardly anybody had any money. And one guy came and paid the whole rent. But I think it was something like $30 for the month or something like that.
Oh, that was a lot if it was.
But this was a whole house right there. And then, you know, we would go into the market and buy our food and stuff like that. And you know, one of the crazy things in the early days in the market in India, in the United States, you're so used to having a package of whatever it is, and on the back of the package it tells you how to cook it, right? In India, you go, and the shopkeeper's sitting on the floor, and around him are all these wooden bins and all these things in it, and you don't even know what they are, much less how to cook them, right? So over time, and we had these our kitchen had these two little kind of three little cement posts, and you put the fire in between it, and they put these ceramic red earthenware pots on top of it, and you'd cook your khichdi or your stew or whatever it was. And we would go around the beach all over and collect firewood to cook our meal. And there were about 6 of us living there.
It was a wonderful, simple life. It really
was. I just had one of those roll-out mats on the cement floor with my sleeping bag. There was no mattress whatsoever. It was really pretty. And the guy living there was this guy Omeric.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Omeric was Om Eric, and he'd been an advertising executive, dropped out. He'd taken a vow of silence, and the only thing he would do out loud is he would sing in classical Greek. He would sing chapters of the Odyssey and the Iliad, right? This guy was a space cadet. He was really out there, all dressed in white, actually, with his hair tied up. One time I was pretty stoned there. We could get hash and so on. And I'm looking up at the clouds, and I see this cloud flying by, and it looked exactly like Omeric. I mean, the whole cloud was like him, the way his hair was. And I said, whoa, this guy's out there, man. I never saw him again after that, but he was kind of the center of our group.
So then it started changing, and everyone started moving north to Anjuna.
They all moved up,
Kalangut, Anjuna.
Colva Beach is south of Panjim, the capital, and Margao, right? But then north, on the other side of the river, was Anjuna, Arambol, Kalangut, and Kandolim, and all those places that later on became very, very famous.
So those places are now more.
And that's where Eight Finger Eddie went first, and all the hippies tended to gather there because there really weren't very many houses, but it was all coconut palms and rice paddies and beach, and it was really, you know.
And you know, the thing I loved about it, because I tried first going to Hawaii, you know, like I was 19 years old or something. I said, I'm getting out of here. I've got to get rid of the San Francisco fog. I'm going to the tropics. And I had this whole image of the tropics. I got to Hawaii, and even back then, there was still a McDonald's or something, you know. But you get to India, and you've got the women with the fruit baskets on their heads. And it was the real thing.
And there were almost no cars in the early days, right? Just those ambassador cars. And so there were also, nowadays in India, you see all these stainless steel things. But in the first days when I went there, they didn't have stainless steel. Everything, all these things were all made out of brass. These brass pots and brass plates and brass glasses and so on. So we had this kind of little commune operating in South Anjuna, and it was not South Anjuna, in South Goa in Kandolim. But then later, you and I went together.
So then many years we didn't go to India, and then when we did. In '86, like I said, I'd never been. Oh, what a big boy!
Never been to Goa.
Never been to Goa, and Swami's ex and the mother of his second son, Mireille, was living there with other friends. So, okay, let's go. So Goa had gone through many transitions since you'd been there in the '70s.
Oh, right.
First of all, what had happened was it used to be that Goa is the start of these full moon all night parties on the beach,
right?
And that used to be kind of mediocre rock and roll bands that would, just anybody. They bring out their instruments.
Everybody said, "Oh, the Stones are coming out." Next week the Stones are going. They never. It
was sort of these bands, and people would play on the beach, and it was great. It didn't matter. It was just great. And then over time, trance and electronic music started coming in. A lot of German people go to Goa.
Yeah, in the
mid-80s. And that's a lot of where it came from in the beginning.
But there was this, I think his name was Laurent.
Yeah, Laurent.
Was one of the very first people to do Goa Trance. And then, of course, Goa Gil came along, and those parties became really famous.
So now, of course, you have an all-night full moon party where the music doesn't stop. That was always the thing with the band. They have to take a break.
Right.
So this was just non-stop beats and such psychedelic trance and, everything to match it. So it all went together. And these were magical. Then for a few years, as happened in the Bay Area, actually, some really bad drugs came in.
That's true. And smack came in. That
for many years. This is before we moved back to Goa. Went back.
And by the time we got there in the late 80s, it was clearing up quite a bit. It was
just starting to change.
But there was a really established community. There was like Jerry Schultz, who was kind of the unofficial mayor, right? And it was an Acid Eric.
And there were thousands of freaks there.
Right. Mushroom Jack.
All over the world.
No one had a last name in those days, and nobody took pictures, because everyone was kind of on a scam of some sort, right? So everyone just had a first name. There's a guy, Chicago's, right? Everybody just had their first name. And
and the last thing you did was ask them what they do.
No one asked what you did, right? Although you might ask them how they'd smuggled the last bit in, because they were famous for false bottom suitcases and so. I was thinking we should smoke a little hash just to celebrate. Because in India,
like, for example, there were young Goan boys that, grew up to be grown men, of course. But they, when they were young, they used to have these guys help them do suitcases.
The Westerners would have the young Goans,
sew them up and make them look just perfect and fill them in. And it was like a little,
But later on, those like Xavier, he got to be a restaurateur and a mini hotel and. All these people, they made good money.
Right.
Because what happened is the Westerners, of course, would get there and set up house.
Right.
And by the time we got there in the late 80s, people would live there, Westerners would live there for 6-8 months, right?
Well, the local villages or towns that actually had shopping markets, outside market kind of things, they flourished, like Mopsa or something, because
we didn't have much money, but we spent it all locally.
And, you'd have to get a fresh mattress because it ended up moldy from the monsoon last year.
But in Goa,
you'd have to get this, you'd have to get that. They made good money,
They made good money.
And
Pots
they started,
and
not to mention renting their places for 10 times what they could rent it to any Goan for. And then it started changing. Does
this look familiar? This is the way you normally get hash in, or chadas, as they call it, from Manali up in the North India. And it would come like this, but see, this is really nice and soft, and this is made by Frenchie with our flowers and so on. But in India, you don't really get good marijuana. You don't get really good flowers, so everyone makes hash or chadas, and that's what the normal smoking.
So in India, they call this a tola. They call this a tola. A tola is like a. I don't know. Wait, how much?
No, tola was 10 grams because that's what the rupee coin weighed, right?
10 grams.
I better get moving on this because we're going to smoke
10 grams of tola and.
Okay. But look how soft and
juicy. This is like cream, though. This is like
Well, that's what they have this special up in Manali they call malai, which is Sanskrit or Hindi for cream. And that's just the very first cutting or scraping. They say they would go out into the fields with the live plants and they would go like this on the branches and they get the resin they would scrape off their hands. That's the cream. That's the malai.
By the way, in case you're wondering about these plants.
They're males.
Boys.
Boys are undetermined yet. They're going to be put down after the show, unfortunately.
Oh, that's such a rough way to put it. They're going to take a long nap.
We can only have our limited number.
That's right, we can, and we're not making seeds, so because we would have to have that would have to go into our number. That's a whole other story. Getting back to local. Oh
very
God,
tasty.
How can I have a joint and a?
Come on, it's our show. We can do whatever we want. So anyway, we're smoking hash because that's what we always smoked in India. You really don't get good cannabis flower there. So come on, Nikki.
Frenchie.
Yeah, thank you, Frenchie. Right, because we know Frenchie. I mean, he was in Goa. We didn't know him there, but we met him since, and we have all these friends in common. There's something about. Okay. Yeah, this is good stuff.
Frenchie is your classic Goa French freak. Actually, the French were a lot of French in Goa. A lot of Germans, a lot of Japanese. Now there's a lot of Russians. So it started changing. It started changing and changing, and Russians, Israelis. Now it's also a lot of wealthy Indians that
right,
go
from
there
all
for
over,
their
right.
winter vacations, their
Right.
spring holiday breaks.
Right.
It's become more like Florida at springtime or something, really.
No, because we used to
anymore.
get there at the end of monsoon, like late September, early October, and leave in April.
Yeah.
And I remember in days we had a whole softball league.
Yeah,
that
we lived there. It was great. It was home.
And people would have dinner parties over at other houses.
It was a wonderful community.
And at sunset, you'd go down to, what was the name of that place on the beach? Shore Bar. We'd go down to Shore Bar at sunsets, and there'd be trance music blaring out. And then at least once a week, there'd be an all-night party. And see, the thing is that Goa Gill would play for 24 hours.
Yeah.
Right? Most of the other DJs would play for 3 or 4 hours or something like that. But, you know, Gil's always famous for, you know, doing that whole 24-hour set. So
the thing we want to point out, though, is that we didn't just spend time in Goa when we were in India. You know, we did go out a lot, and that might be our next show. Maybe
that would be our headquarters.
Let's move on to that, and our next show will be about...
we'd have a house there.
Karnataka.
And then we go out.
Tipu is obviously saying this one's over, and I think it's time to wrap it up.
No, we would go... what we would do, staying in Goa and have our friends and good food and everything else, and then we would then go out and visit various temples all over South India and meet with various babas and priests and so on, and get our total Hindu indoctrination happening. So anyway, that'll be one of the next shows. We'll talk about the rest of South India that we visit over time, Chidambaram.
Okay. Thanks for coming.
Anyway, that's it for
As
Smokin'
we say
with
in
Swami.
Goa, boom.
You want to know the hidden hash?